Toni Harrison, founder and CEO of Etched Communication, talks to host Doug Simon on PR's Top Pros Talk.
Toni, what are some of the best recommended practices you have for PR to play a key role in business strategy?
I think it's important to think about PR from the perspective of proactive performance. So many times PR is brought to the table after strategic business decisions are made. Hey, we've made a decision. This is the product we're going with. Go work your magic and create a campaign. But if we flip that around and we put PR at the planning table, what if the products we selected were more poised for success with our markets because PR was at the table? And we have the knowledge of consumer performance looks like this, previous coverage looked like that. Sometimes it's even predictive vulnerability, looking at competitors and saying, hey, someone else is going to be launching at a similar time. Or let's look at issues that happened in the industry to us or to our competitors, and how can we now plan our business strategies in advance to mitigate those?
And increasingly, you've been part of those earlier discussions.
This is very new. Again, we are usually brought into the decisions after they are made. But let's flip that around and talk about proactive performance. Then you see how PR can sit at the table for business planning strategy.
It's interesting because what you're talking about can really create opportunities for clients and organizations to expand the market they're selling to, not just grow who they're selling to, but be able to maybe diversify it if there's that thought up front.
Very true. As we look at diversifying markets, there are a few key points. First, know the audience you wish to reach. And I don't mean just know, hey, we're looking for male, females, ages 21 to 35 in urban centers who frequently purchase said product. That's still very expansive. To really know an audience, especially an audience you maybe haven't tapped before, you have to know their value systems. How do they make purchasing decisions? What are their current pain points or barriers that you could solve for them? Not just where do they live, while that is important and demographic information is important, to expand into other markets, you have to look at all of that, we'll say qualitative qualities as well, right? We'll have to look at those value systems. We also have to know our current audiences. Sometimes we've seen brands say, hey, I want to expand into a new market. And somehow they alienate the current market who says, well, what about us? We've been here, we've been your clients, or we've been buying your products, or whatever the case is. So you have to look at both. It starts with, who is this new audience I want to seek and attract? And then how do I make sure in doing so, I'm not alienating the current audience who's loyal to my brand or product?
That is such an important point to consider. Authenticity for brands is also critical. And does knowing the audience and the different audiences help align authentic messages that are going to resonate?
Absolutely, it does. All of us make decisions based on value systems and culture. Now, I want to be careful with the word culture and dive into that for just a second, because when you say culture, everyone thinks race or ethnicity. And yes, sometimes that is what culture is. But culture can also be the culture of an industry. Let's say we're going after a sports product, right? Knowing the culture of that sport, how people are competitive with it. Is it a fantasy sport? Is it an individual sport? Knowing things like that helps with authenticity. Same way if we're talking about a B2B organization who says, hey, we've realized there are more female business owners that we need to target. Well, knowing how to speak to that female business owner or entrepreneur, which may be very different than speaking to, say, hey, a traditional male-run organization that's been established for a long time. So if you want your message to connect, and you want to have a better shot of really engaging with the audience, keep in mind, engaging is two-way. It's a message you put out, but it's also how they receive it and what they do with it. Why we talk about influence, right? Influence is necessary to engage. If you want those two things, you don't just want them to see or hear your message, but engage with it, Authenticity is key because people make decisions based on culture and experience.
Yeah. And obviously, your knowledge, experience, and persuasive abilities come through when you're working with clients. And this wouldn't just be your agency across the board. Sometimes it's a challenge to get their buy in and understanding. What are some of the ways you approach that to make sure that they jump on your page and it's the right page for them?
Start with the business outcome. It is very hard for any competent executive to see, hey, this will help us reach our goal, but I'm going to say, no, let's not do it. Now, of course, you want to be reasonable. Know your budget constraints. know everything that you'll need to launch or to enter a marketplace. But start with the end. What is the goal or objective you're trying to achieve? And how will this decision move the company or the product or the service forward? And once you can truly demonstrate that and then line up your strategies and tactics saying that, hey, they are going to move this objective forward, again, it's very hard to not sell in an idea.
Yeah, and it doesn't always move in a straight line, whether it's a communications plan or business. So sometimes you have to sell in the idea of what's a reasonable time interval, the knowledge that maybe some of the things are going to work well, others won't. So you need to be flexible and assess. Is that an important part? Because sometimes you'll start, it seems like it's good, and oh, there's a setback to the plan or a company has a change. How can you be prepared to handle those scenarios without let's chuck the whole thing?
Well, first, I want to say flexibility and authenticity go hand in hand because there are times where it is the same message or the same product, but how it's delivered is based on the audience and what you need to get from them. Remember, push and pull with engagement, right? So it's what you put out there, but it's also what you bring back. And yes, flexibility and being nimble within the moment is always required, but that is why measurement practices must be always on and done in real time.
You have your own proprietary approach to measurement. Can you talk about that?
So when you're measuring in real time, there's something that we implement at Etched called predictive vulnerability. And what we do is, yes, we're monitoring mentions and pickups, but we're also looking at Reddit threads, our new conversations starting in other places. We're going beyond social to say, is someone else quoting this? Or is something on our social ending up on a blog post somewhere? There are so many different ways to look at performance and measurement, but that comes back to flexibility. Sometimes you can say, hey, based on this performance, this is really working. Let's do more of it. And maybe we don't need to spend as much. Maybe we don't need this big campaign 6 months later. Sometimes you're monitoring in real time and you say, hey, that's not sticking. Let's try this a little bit more. Either way, you should be operating with flexibility, understanding that that is necessary. We no longer wait till we get to the end to measure. Measure in real time as you go, but also knowing that the market determines sometimes the success. And sometimes if the market isn't responding, you'll also need to be flexible to make sure that they do. So you're not getting to the end saying, that didn't work, really sorry. But rather, hey, we saw something wasn't work. We were nimble in the moment, and look at the result we had at the end.
This has been such a great conversation. Any final thoughts you'd like to add?
Thinking about public relations on the front end of business strategy may be hard to sell in, but that doesn't mean it's not worth the fight. Or should I say the challenge? Our ability to really impart measurable change or measurable results has a lot to do with how we plan on the front end. Sitting at the table, whether that's with the corporate arm, a product arm that's a brand under a corporate umbrella, or even a B2B organization. If we're planning together, we're thinking about our objectives together and how we will realize them in the end. And that is the difference between implementing tactics and being a strategic partner with the corporate entity from start to finish. That is the pathway forward. No longer should the public relations function simply be firefight, simply be, hey, we need you to go do this. figure it out. It is so much more than mentions. It is so much more than likes and clicks. It's even more than headlines. We're driving business change, and we must be at the table at the front end.
And Toni, I've loved talking to you from start to finish. So thanks so much for joining the program.
Thank you for having me.